us. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone on the stream, or not on the stream, but hopefully joining soon. This is our first session in education with Kerstetter. Sorry about the baby noise in the background. I am soon going to be muting myself as soon as I introduce Ed Kerstetter. Hi, Ed. How are you?
Pretty good, Eric. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. We are extremely appreciative of your time and you joining us and giving us your knowledge. Given my situation here with the baby, I'm going to hand it off to you. Looking forward to this track walk and information on Kyalami and learning from your experience. So I'm going to hand it off to you, and I will be here with the little baby in the back. Sorry about that, everyone.
All right. No, sounds good. Good luck with the baby. So yeah, as Eric said, this is hopefully the first in several of these track walk videos. The goal here is to do a track walk initially, and then if we have time, we're thinking about taking about an hour for these. Cover things in the track walk such as braking points, curb usage, passing areas, danger areas, things like that. And then we'll review a recorded lap to sort of reinforce what we talked about in the track walk. And then if we have time and we don't have a lot of questions and we still need to fill up the hour, there's a couple sort of focus areas that maybe we'll try to look at each week. This week, possibly like things like brake bias from a setup perspective for a car setup, and then if we still have time after that, then maybe some things around game setup such as field of view. And so I guess we'll jump right in with the track walk. So hopefully you all can hear me okay. Danny, let me know if if I'm coming over loud and clear. By the way, I see you're in chat right now. But yeah, this is Kyalami. I had to look up how to pronounce it. Didn't know if it was Kyalami or Kyalami. Apparently, it's Kyalami. Yeah, we're in the GT4s for this particular track walk. Carter Racing School is doing a similar track walk with GT3s that I think is going to be happening. Eric, chime in here. I forget what date and time that'll be happening.
Yeah, so that
if you're there.
Yep, that'll be the.
I know he's probably got his hands full, so we'll get when that Carter Racing School walkthrough is for the GT3s. But yeah, the main focus here is GT4s, obviously different cars, and so a little bit different braking points and a little bit different curb usage. And so yeah, we'll get started here.
Yeah, sorry. Before you start, the GT3 is going to be the week before. The Friday before our first GT3 race. So it's going to be Friday the 21st, and we're going to be walking around Silverstone, which is where our first GT3 race is on January 23rd. So if anyone is looking for a GT3 season to join, we are still one or two more spots left. We're pretty full in GT3, and GT4 will be starting the week after next week. Considering that tomorrow's our qualifying race, so or this Thursday's our qualifying race. Sorry.
Time has no meaning anymore. Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. And so yeah, Kyalami has 16 turns in its current configuration. And so what we'll do for the track walk is just start from the start-finish line, walk through the track, fly around via the virtual camera in ACC, and just talk about the different parts of the track. What if there's one particular preferred line, or if there's sort of different approaches to the corner, what to watch out for, what curbs you can use, what curbs you shouldn't use, where you can really get nailed for track limits. I know I ran a couple races today where I had a couple luckily no stop and goes, but definitely had some track cuts. So good practice for this walkthrough. And yeah, so let's get started. So start finish line here is located right at the end of pit road. And so you'll be full throttle off corner 16. And the first corner here isn't really a corner at all. It's a kink. And so this is flat out. From a hot lap perspective, you can use this inside concrete. path a little bit. Gain a thousandth of a second by doing that, but every little bit counts. In the race, usually you'll not be that aggressive. You don't want to get in the grass. But otherwise, completely flat out. If you're in a race with pits, be sure to watch out for track entries coming up here. Although we all know there is a preferred white line that you shouldn't pass over, but most people ignore that. So just be cognizant there. If you're trying to focus down on your braking point, someone might be coming out of the pits. But it does give them a long leeway here, so usually it's not too bad up until you get down to the braking zone. Coming into the braking zone, you have a few different markers. One of the things that we chatted about within our league a few nights ago is Kyalami has some brake markers, not just the signs on the side of the track, but also on track for most of the corners. So I personally like to use these markings on track. I like to look as straight as possible when I'm driving, and I don't like glancing off to the side, especially when you're kind of racing door to door with somebody. And so primarily I'll try to use the white lines on the track. However, brake boards are also good. And then if the brake boards kind of go away, you kind of need a third reference if you're racing with somebody and the brake board's gone. But for corner number 2, I think this is Crowthorne. Sorry if I butcher some of the pronunciations of the corners. I believe this is actually turn 2. I don't know if they treat the kink as 1 or not, but so coming down into it, you are really looking for this 100 sign and the corresponding 100 marker on the track. And so typically here in GT3s, most cars will break at the 100 or just before. With GT4s, and again, this is super car specific. So, like, at least in my experience, I haven't driven all the GT4 cars, but cars like the BMW, I think, have pretty good brakes. And you might be able to go a little bit further. Personally, for this track walk, and hot lap, I've driven the McLaren. And so I think that's probably a decent car, mid-range car on the braking. So you may have to adjust your brake, maybe 5-10 feet, 2 to 3 meters in either direction, depending on how good your car is. Hey, we got some folks in chat, so cool. Welcome, guys. Thanks for jumping on. I'll try to monitor chat, by the way, throughout this whole thing. So if you have any questions, let me know. I am bad at multitasking, though, so if you ask a question, I don't get to it quite yet. Don't worry, I'll get back to it, and we'll see if we can get your question answered. But like I said, I'm not the best at multitasking, so
I'll support with that. If I see any questions, I'll let you know.
Okay, cool.
And
awesome.
I'll try to add some like intermediate flavor to some of the things that you're saying. And one of the things that I want to say, for example, when you're bringing up the braking markers, as someone who doesn't have as precise control of the car as you do, or maybe doesn't have the brake bias set up, that could be some frustration that comes into play when people are like, oh my God, this person's braking so much later than I am. And a lot of factors go into that, brake bias being one, setup, and just your positioning on the track, right? So if you're taking an optimal line, being as far out as possible and rounding out the curve, then you're able to brake a little bit later and really have a good trail braking into the corner, which gives you a lot more grip than being more variable in your braking ability.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Eric. Thanks for bringing that up. So I guess what I'll try to do is shift to more of a brake range. So like, if you're coming onto the track for the first time, look at these as references, but then adjust accordingly. Don't try to always go to the point that I say, hey, 100, 10 meters or 10 feet before the 100 mark, right? And just don't try to hammer that down. If it's not working, right, back it up a little bit. But the main point here is like breaking reference points. So as you're going down, keep your eye on this point, and then try braking where we cover it here in practice, obviously. And if that doesn't work, back it up a little bit until you feel comfortable, or go the other way, be a little bit more conservative and inch towards that brake marker a little bit every lap, for sure.
And to add to that, there's tire wear, weather, temperature as well. So lots of variables, right? So to Ed's point, it's always every lap almost is a is a decision that you have to make, whether you feel like there's conditions that have changed since your previous lap, or they're relatively same, so you have to adjust accordingly as you go through the race.
Yep. So I guess keep that in mind as we're going through each of the corners. I'll call out like my reference point, and typically where I break, and then instead of me saying it 16 times, just again, there's going to be some range within that. So yeah, as you're coming down into this braking zone, this is very hard braking zone. You're on, the brakes for a long time. This corner here typically is sort of I guess I'll try to break the corners down into, do you try to swing it out wide? Do you try to take sort of a compromise where you're going, I guess what would look like the ideal line if you're looking down from a helicopter, or do you try to take an early apex and then and so I'll try to break those corners down into those three high level categories. For this one, for me, I tend to take that medium line, so I don't try to send it in deep and then apex late, or I don't try to apex too early. I'm trying to take what feels like a normal apex here. So again, braking or reference line is maybe 10, 15 feet prior to the 100. Hard on the brakes, and we'll see car positioning once I actually do the recording. I get to see the car there and where it's at, and I'll do a review. I'll try to do it in the car, and then I'll try to do an external camera. Eric, if you can remind me if the baby's not crying, I'll try to do both, and then just shut up during that.
She's been partially subdued, so
okay.
I'm back in action now.
Cool. So then, yeah, I'll try to run through both where I'm not talking throughout it, and I'll let you just hear the brakes and hear the engine and everything like that. So, so coming down here, you're very hard on the brakes. Curb usage here, you have this inside curb. Here at Kyalami, it seems like they've made black rubber. It seems like this is kind of most tracks, but usually anytime there's some black on the inside curb, it means like heavy like this, that you can end up using it a little bit to your advantage. GT3 cars, not so much. GT3 ride heights are much lower than GT4s, so you can't really abuse the curbs as much as you can in the GT4s. But throughout this track walk, you'll see if it's heavily rubbered, chances are you have a good chance of like being able to use it and not die on the curbs. So typically here, when you're coming in, I've seen people do it both ways. For me, it's sort of depending on how good I get the braking zone coming into the corner, I'll decide to use the curb or not use the curb. I really don't have a preference one way or another. It just depends on how I'm entering the corner based on if I broke a little late or a little early. Coming off this corner here, what you don't want to do is swing it all the way wide. So in this instance, where there's dark rubber, don't use it, especially in the GT4s, because what's going to happen is you're just going to mess up your line into the sweep. I think I want to, yeah, the sweep. It's called the Jukes Kyoe sweep. Sorry, I'm going to butcher pronunciations, but we'll just call it the sweep. And so really, when you're coming off this corner, you want to kind of keep it towards the middle part of the track. That way you can set up this sweeping corner and not end up pinching your line. And yeah, as I'm talking here, I think, Eric, that's a really good idea. So let me actually just do bring the car in to focus, and you can kind of see, and then I'll try to do it where you can jump around. Let's see, focus on the car, and then focus outside of the car. So that's a good. Thanks for bringing that up, Eric.
Yeah, I think if we go through the corners as the car, pause it in your entry and mid corner and exit, then they can see positioning and braking points and things like that.
No, that's perfect. And guys, this is our first run through here, so we're gonna have some of these like, hey, why don't we try it this way? This will be a little bit better. We didn't really have any time to practice. We prior to this, and we figured this is our qualifying race for the GT4s, so we'll use this as a dry run here. So, and I guess I can combine a little bit of the overlays. You can hopefully you can see the overlays on the stream. Let's see, make sure you can. Yep. All right. And sorry, I have the ultra wide, so I know it's a little bit smaller. And this is a good illustration of the fact that sometimes your reference points in the cockpit don't necessarily match exactly where you're braking on track. Because for me, it feels like I'm braking. Let's say I'm braking actually here, so this is actually good for me. I'm starting to get on the brakes, while like in the car, it feels like I'm starting to brake here. where I guess you can see my mouse. Hopefully,
we cannot
let's
see
see,
your
one.
cursor.
Okay. Usually, if you go 3 red blocks, the start of the 3 red blocks before the 100 sign, that's where I feel like I'm breaking in the car. But
yeah, maybe if
whether
you
it's
jump into your in-car view, it could
sure,
show the stark difference. So
yeah. So like to me, this looks much closer than what this looks like.
right, and that's a really good point. As we go through trying to learn, you know, the perception of reviewing a lap from outside the car to inside the car is quite different. So it's a good thing to note that, you know, when you do something like this, you pay attention to both perspectives.
Yep. Thanks. Cool. So I'll play it forward here a little bit, get caught up. So like I said, I'm not trying to throw it in real deep and then apex late. For me, this is sort of a normal turn-in point. So here I actually was a little bit wider than I wanted to be. I was hoping to, let's see if I do 5 seconds back. I was hoping to at least clip the curb. This here is a little bit wider than I would have liked. Ideally, you're right on the curb, or like literally on the curb, or hugging the white line um, on the inside of the curb. So here I'm a little bit wide, lost probably half a tenth or so. Coming off, like I said, try not to bring it too far. And this is all the stuff. I did a hot lap here, and yeah, I'm telling you something different than what's being shown. Because of this wide line here, I compromised this corner. So I had to lift, and it probably, like I said, cost me a little bit of time. So that's an aspect of, or that's a do as I say, not as I do type of deal. But coming into here, again, this should be relatively flat out. There might be a little bit of a lift. And in the GT4s, you can really use this curb more than you can in the GT3s. The GT3s will kind of bounce off of it if you hit it hard. GT4s, you'll kind of just scoot right past it, scoot right over it. So if you use it as much as I did, you'll get some decent bumps, but you won't lose a lot of time in the GT4s. Typically, I'll try to use a little bit less than what I'm using here. Now into the next corner, we're looking at, let's see, this would be barbecue. And so this is probably one of the toughest corners on the track for me. And I think Danny jumped in. So Danny, feel free to do any color commentary or anything. Danny is, we're teammates in the GT3s and GT4s. And Danny has graciously come in here to assist with the stream. So thanks, Dan.
Yeah, you're doing a phenomenal job. But if you have any questions or if there's anything that I can help out with, please
Oh,
let me
sure.
know.
Oh, thanks. And yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, just if you have a different way to attack the corner, or there, you know, I feel like our driving styles are similar in a lot of aspects, but also differ in some. So I'd be willing to hear your feedback too, because I know you are you're a quick man, so I can learn something on these educations too.
So I wanted to add something about this lap that you're showing, Ed, that you've shown so far. I think it's important to note that, for example, take me, a mediocre driver. I'm not gonna say I'm bad. I'm like halfway okay, but not to your guys' level. But we're watching you do a hot lap, and it's not perfect, right? And it just goes to show that no matter what level of experience you're on, there's always room to learn and improve. There's always room to, whether it's learning setups, whether it's learning technicalities of the game, or setting up your devices, your FOVs, and whatever else it is, or learning how to be more consistent and more precise with your driving. There's always room to improve, right? And I think that's something for everybody to understand, that this isn't something that you just pick up and are good at, generally speaking. It's a lot of work and time that goes into trying to perfect, or try to perfect as best as you can to be a faster driver.
Yep, good point.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I think a lot of people lose that grasp at that. You know, they see these people doing some pretty insane lap times, but they don't see the work going behind them. And it takes a long time to get to the point where you can be proficient enough to do consistent laps over time. And it does take several hours. I've talked to you about this, Eric, where I get obsessive about setups, and I'll sit there for hours about going back and forth between a couple different clicks. But that all builds consistency and familiarity with the track and the car. So it's not just a jump in and go and get fast lap times kind of thing. And I think a lot of people assume that is the case.
Yeah, and I wanted to stress and express to the viewers we have. So we have 12 people watching right now. That's awesome. Like, you guys have been gracious enough to say, hey, if you have a question, just ask me. I've personally taken advantage of that. And honestly, in the last race, I was up to 9th place in GT3, which is something that I wasn't even close to in our previous season with a very similar grid. I was probably in like the high teens, maybe low 20s. And it's not that nothing miraculous happened. It's just, hey, we sat down and talked about what we're talking about here and some of the techniques that you guys use, and some installing like a head stabilizer for the camera, which is insanely like detailed and something I would never have thought about. So everyone who's here, you guys, most of you guys are in the server already. If you're not, please join us. And we have a coach's corner that you can ask questions, and these guys will graciously answer.
Cool. Alrighty. All good points. Thanks, guys, for bringing that up. So this corner here, barbecue. I don't have a good breaking point reference in the car. For me, this is one of those corners that's purely by feel. Danny, I don't know if you look at any sort of reference here. If you want to chime in, but I don't have one.
This one is tricky. In the GT3s, at least, the key for me was listening to the rev limiter or the rev range and saying, recognizing the pitch at which I know I can start slowing down. So you can use items like that. Rev limiter. You can also use indications on your dash, so how many lights are showing up on your rev limiter. So that's another way you can use for an indication you need to slow down or hit the brakes. But yeah, this corner in particular is pretty tricky because you don't really have. I mean, you have a couple orange reference points along the edge of the track, so up along the barrier on the outside, and the inside you got those orange cones on the inside. But it's tough to see, especially if you have traffic in front of you. So this one is tricky.
So,
like Carlos says.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you saw it as well.
Yeah. Antenna on the right, or the start of the sand on the right as well. So those are two great reference points from Coach himself.
Yeah, and I'll just clarify too. Like sometimes it varies. Like for some corners that don't have a good breaking point on track or a sign or something, if you do end up wanting to use something that's more in the peripheral vision, just be careful, because based on your field of view and your seating position in the car, and your monitor size and a ton of other things, you may not see that. So like if you're looking at replays online and you're like, oh, this person brakes when this antenna comes out of view, your view might be different from their view. So on corners like this, it's you're going to have to tweak basically what most people say when you're not using a direct reference that's close to the track. And then just a second point on that too, like as you're driving, you're probably not during a race going to be looking up and like being like, oh, there's that antenna there, right? Because then you're going to have to look at look over or try to see it in the peripheral vision and then look back to the apex. So it's sort of like everybody uses some different things. I know, like, well, I don't have a reference per se. I'm mainly looking at distance to apex. So you can kind of see here, like you get a gauge on how far you're away from the apex. And I tend to just try to use that based, and also like a little bit Danny said, engine noise, things like that, where it kind of gives you not a strict break point like you do entering the first main corner here, but you at least know you have a 10 or 15 foot range, and you're not going to hit it great every time, but every time you go through it, you'll learn a little bit more and narrow down that range a little bit to something a little bit more finite.
So we actually have a really good question. I've actually wondered this myself and just never got around to asking. But do you guys change brake bias? Not necessarily maybe corner to corner or sector to sector?
Well, in the McLaren, luckily, no, because it's you actually can't control the brake bias. But typically, for me, it's track dependent. So in the GT3s, I normally drive the Porsche, and for that, at a track like say Imola, I'd probably change it 3 or 4 times during the event. For example, the downhill section before the last set of corners, you can really go pretty far negative in the Porsche on brake bias. And so I end up adjusting for that and then having to readjust. And there's a couple other points on track. It is a distraction though. So, if you're struggling to adjust brake bias, or you have to like reach over and it's not consistent, you forget to do it. I don't think the time gain on adjusting brake bias is necessarily worth it until you get to a point where that becomes sort of second nature and you're like 4 clicks down and then 4 clicks up and it's not impeding your focus. That's just my opinion though, Danny.
Yeah, I don't. I'll be the first to tell you that. I'm sitting on a wheel that doesn't give me much options for assigning features or assigning brake bias, stuff like that. So I do have essentials and I do have brake bias assigned to my wheel, but like you mentioned, it's something that I have to consciously think about, and it distracts from what I'm trying to do on track. So I personally do not. Um, but a lot of people do. The only adjustments if I do make during a race will be based off of fuel load. So as you start burning off the fuel, your weight balance is going to change, and then you can adjust your brake bias from there. Or in the wet, for example, if it's really wet going dry, you can adjust your brake bias, or vice versa, dry going to wet. So those are very useful as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. So yeah, heading into this corner, once you sort of, I'll show you where I kind of end up braking just based on the trace. I couldn't tell you. If you told me like, stop the video where you think you brake, I have no clue. So I'm just gonna look at the brake trace and kind of give some frame of reference here. Let's see. So right sort of as this big curve is ending, just before it, and probably from a range perspective, like maybe 1 or 2 car lengths after the yellow curb ends on the left. You might be able to use as a closer to an on-track reference point, but as Coach Cardo mentioned, looks like he uses the antenna on the right or the start of the sand.
Maybe if you hop
on the
in
right.
car as well in this
Yep.
very position, that'd be
sure.
So that gives us a really, as Cardo mentioned earlier, the frame of view changes. This is a good spot to look, and now you have the wider screen as well, so just keep that in mind, everyone, that it's kind of a guesstimate of where it is, but gives you an idea of where you should start working at.
Yep. All right, and for this corner here, I do try to bring it out somewhat close to the curb. You don't want to use the extra runoff area before the sand, the brown. I don't know if what they're necessarily called, but you want to avoid that. I try not to necessarily get on the curb because I don't think there's a ton of time gain doing that, and there's a lot of risk if you miss it. So I try to shoot for kind of where I'm at here. And then this corner is like a few corners at Kyalami where, for me, I'm doing throttle management because it's sort of like there's a crest, and there's a feeling of you get over the crest, and if you're on the throttle slightly before the crest, you'll tend to get a little loose and oversteery. And so it's always this like like a game around like, okay, I want to get on it as soon as possible, but I don't want to get loose over the crest. So this is where there's a few different ways through it. I don't think there's one super fast way. From what I've seen some dude today just ran the GT3 like a 140.4 in a race trip, and he didn't touch any of the curbs. And then I've seen other guys use the curbs pretty heavy. So in the GT4s, you can end up using this curb pretty good. There is a pretty big bump. In this lap, I did not use the curb at all. And on other laps, I've completely killed it. So again, I would experiment with both and just see what you're more comfortable with and what fits your driving style. Again, in the GT4s and the GT3s, you probably don't want to hit it all that much. And then coming off the corner, this is a long straight. So for me, my priority is I want to maximize my corner exit speed to carry speed down into this long straightaway. It's long, but it's not like terribly long. But and then here you can see you want to use all the runoff, but like at the very you don't want to go like right on the edge because there's some bumps, and you'll lose some tire pressure. And then you want to make sure you get back over before the end of this, obviously. And there is a track limits here. I actually got that today, and I thought it was the cheapest track limits I've ever gotten because I didn't gain any. I lost time, and it still gave it to me. So coming off here, let's see if I can. You said it's Control F7 to detach, right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to work with the keyboard commands that I don't use a ton. So thanks for Eric for chiming me in here. So coming off, you can see how you end up. I ended up using a lot of the curb, and you want to make sure you get back over before kind of where the shadow is. Obviously, don't use the shadow for real, but you want to kind of get back over off the curb before you're about maybe 10 feet from the edge, or else you'll get some bumps. All right, so coming up to this next corner, this is, let me check my track map. This is Sunset. Not quite Sunset yet, but close. So here I use, personally, I use where the, hey, Fetty. Thanks for the paints, by the way. This is, I think you guys can see it in the chat, right? So, or in Twitch. So this is a paint scheme that Fetty did for us. I'm assuming, Danny, that's the Fetty that did our paints, right?
That is the one and only Fetty Designs. Yes, he was kind enough to do this livery, and he did our Camaro livery for last season.
He did. Both are strikingly beautiful. So thanks, Fetty. These are awesome looking. I'll do a little 360. Show you his fine artwork.
From someone who slaves over liveries more than he should, I want to give credit where credit's due. They look awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. And thanks, Fetty. So yeah, coming into this corner, I personally look at where the curb starts to shrink, and I use that. I probably am maybe 10 feet back from that is where I feel like I get off the throttle or on the brake, and looks like I actually am fairly close from the overlay that you see here. And this corner is super tricky. Different cars will take it different ways depending if it's front or rear engine. For me, the theme of this corner is patience. Because it's very easy to get back on the throttle too early or throw it in too hard and then completely mess it up and lose 3 or 4 tenths. So personally, I get on here. For me, it's a quick dab of the brakes, and then depending on how that dab goes, I adjust the trail braking throughout. If I overdo it, I'm probably not on the brakes throughout this corner. If I underdo it, I probably am trail braking a little bit more to kind of trade off that speed. But you can tell I'm using all the curb here. Most of the corners I end up using most of the curb on entry, just to widen that track a little bit. So coming into here, you can use the curb a little bit in some cars. It'll actually help turn the car, but you don't want to overdo it because you'll hit some bumps on the inside. On the inside curbing. So here I apex sort of late. So if let's see if I take this all the way back, at least it feels late. So corner entry is around here. Let's see. It's hard to tell. Okay, corner entry is all the way back here, and then I'm not really apexing here. Like I said, there's a couple different ways. This is the way that feels most comfortable to me. Your mileage may vary there a little bit. And then coming off, you want to, let's see if I can. You can go a little wide here, but really you want to try to not get your tires to the left of the curbing, because it's going to be very hard to get back on prior to the grass, and there's some pretty nasty bumps here. So, you know what, let me do this corner in this perspective, kind of show you what it looks like. So as we're coming up to that curb, let me slow down.
So there is another really good turn-in point. You see the orange mark on the right-hand side along the wall. That right there is a great reference point as well for turning in.
I'm curious, do you delay turn-in until that point, or are you judging based on a distance to that point to start turning in?
I keep it in my peripheral, so as soon as I start seeing that one come up and pass through my eyesight or my line of sight, I will dab the brakes to get the back of the car to rotate in, and then just coast off a throttle until you reach the apex and slowly apply power once you're confident that you're going to make the corner.
Gotcha. Cool. And yeah, I take a little different approach. I do a little bit of trail braking, a little bit of coasting, and then when I get back on it, I try to get back on it full. So like Eric alluded to, and as you're probably seeing, I feel like Danny, you're a little quicker than me. I feel like on average, a tenth or two. But you know, it's interesting for me even just to hear this. Hey, I'm going to try it out on track next time. But just some slight differences in driving style, right? So like, you know, when you see these videos, you know, just know that you don't have to do it as perfect, right? Or try to nail it exactly like this, you know, the driver you're watching. There is some personalization in there as well.
Yeah, that is a great point. Everybody's going to take a corner differently. Regardless of how hard you try to mimic someone, you will have your own driving style regardless. You're going to brake a little later. You're going to brake a little earlier. You're going to find your way around the track. But that's what makes ACC so great is you can have this huge variety of how people do things and still reach pretty insane lap times. So,
yep.
Pretty cool.
Not to mention the differences in cars, right? So you get such a different balance and braking ability and straight line speed between the cars. So that in itself, learning what your car's powers are and what its weaknesses are, tells you where to focus your energy on a little bit, or say, oh, you know, the BMW brakes better than the McLaren, which I don't know if it's true or not, but just as an example. So I can maybe brake a little bit later into this corner, or not, depending on, you know, how each car's performance is.
Oh yeah, we had plenty of those discussions last season.
And I'm sure all those went into deciding which car you're taking for the season this season. So.
No, not really. Just tried to pick one that nobody else was going to.
Well, that's cool.
Cool. So coming into this corner, this is Clubhouse Man, and so I use the 50 sign. It feels like to me that I'm braking actually like midway as I'm in the car, midway between the curb and the 50 sign. This corner you have a little bit more leeway on kind of where you start braking. You can go in a little bit deeper and then try to late apex, or you can kind of brake. I think the line I took here, let's see, was a little bit more. That was a little bit more of a late apex into this corner. So you know, the 50 sign, or when that gets hit, the line on the track is a pretty good reference. And this is another track where it feels like you're cresting over a hill, and you don't want to get on too early because it'll over rotate. But you're always trying to get on as early as possible. So just like the barbecue corner, I feel like these two corners are pretty similar. And then what we'll look at is I think it's crocodiles. I feel like is very similar in that regard as well. Coming up later on in the lap. This is another corner where this is more of a compromise because this straightaway isn't all that long. But what you want to make sure you do is not. Oh, I knew I was going to do that once this time. Click on the replay in a completely different spot. What you definitely don't want to do is get too wide here, because this will kill lap time and it'll kill your tire pressures. And that's about as far off as you want to go. Any more, you're hitting the bumps. And so while this is a shorter straightaway, I do still try to get back on the throttle a little bit early, try to carry more of that speed off and around into the next set of corners. And again, that is that's pretty close. So I wouldn't recommend going any further than that, and that's probably a little bit too much. But again, trying to get back over prior to where the extra curbing sort of ends, extra runoff ends.
Question in chat: do you take the curb on the inside?
This is another one where it depends. You can take it in the GT4s. In the GT3s, you're probably going to avoid it, maybe clip it a little bit. So this is another one where, depending on how well I get into the corner, I'll decide to take it or not. But from what I've seen, there can both be just as fast.
I think it's important to note that there are some things that you can manipulate on track. And what I mean by that is sometimes if you know you're going to need a little extra rotation going into a corner, you can intentionally put a tire on a curb during a braking point to get your back end to rotate around on it on itself a little bit more than it normally would. That goes for using inside curbs. If you know that you're going to need a little bit more rotation there at the apex, then you can touch that curb and it will pull the car around a little bit more than missing the curb. And these are all things that while you're learning the track, you can come to realize that you can manipulate for your own benefit. But you have to be pretty careful when you do so because they can have negative effects as well. So um, and it's something that I don't want to like go out and say, "Hey, use the curb; it'll help rotate the car in," because that's not really how you want to learn the course or the corner. But it is something to keep in mind. Like if you really do need that extra rotation, you can manipulate the curbs in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely not something you're like in the middle of a race and you're like, oh, Danny said I could use the curb, and then you jump the curb for the first time in the race. Probably not the best time to do it. It's something where if you're practicing, try to take it right and see how that makes the car feel, and see how you may have to, as you know, you're going to hit the curb. You may need to put some do an adjustment on your steering input to catch a slide that so that the slide doesn't happen, because when you get on the curb, something this is going to happen. You need to react to save it, or to you know maybe gain a little bit of lap time by using the curb, but the adjustments are necessary. So it's definitely something you want to do in a practice server, not not during a race.
Absolutely, don't use the race for the first time you try it.
Cool. Next set of corner. These are the S's, and there are a few different ways through here. So I'll kind of tell you mine. And again, I feel like Kyalami is one of those tracks where there are a few different lines through these corners, whereas other tracks it's a little bit more like black and white. Like this is the preferred line, and I always like Kyalami because of some of the options you have. So. Here I use the red and white, sort of the red and white curbs. Again, try to use all you can without going too far over it. So I start braking and start turning in. This is just a dab of the brake to settle, to get the front end down and to get a little bit of rotation. And that's it. You're trying not to really do it too much. And you see on the overlay, like I'm fiddling with the brake and a little bit of throttle just to try to position the car where I want it. Sometimes I'll dab the brake and then not have to do that if I hit it right, but you'll see little minor adjustments like this when you see drivers do a little bit of brake and a little bit of gas. It's not it's to like, at least from what I've seen and what I do, is to like shift your cornering line just slightly, like a foot this way or 2 feet that way, by making those little minute adjustments. So here oh, go ahead. Do you have a comment on that, Dan?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's all about balancing that the weight of the car, so you can shift that weight of the car.
Yep. So here, this is one you could take a couple different ways. In this instance, I hit the curb pretty hard. Again, in the GT4s, common theme, you can use this curb a little bit more than you can in the GT4s than you can in the GT3s, to the point where you're almost like middle of the car is sort of middle of the curb, but really, for me, this corner, I try to compromise this corner a little bit to get a good line into the next corner in the S's, because this in the GT4s, I don't think any car can really take it flat unless you really go a little bit too slow in this first corner. It's a compromise so that you get off of this, and you carry the most speed through and get off of this next corner of the S as quickly as possible, because even though it's bendy, it's a fairly long straightaway where you're full throttle. So here, again, this is another one of those where, like, depending on how well I get in, I'll choose to use the curb or not. I don't think one way's faster than another. It's just sort of by feel every lap. And then here is another one where, depending on how well you got off the first S, you can choose to use a lot. This is about as much curb as I used on the inside, but you can choose to really nail it if you need a little bit extra rotation and are feeling lucky, or you can take a little bit more conservative route. But the goal here is to have really just a blip of the throttle through this section and then be flat out to where you're not having to lift here to prevent going wide. So this runoff, just be aware you can get a track cut even if you don't touch the grass. That happened to me again today. So if you're like really pushing the limit, track cut, or the lap won't count. So, but the goal here for me is to come off of this with as much speed as possible, compromising that first part of the S's to come through the second part as fast as I can with as little lift as I can muster out of the car.
Ed, actually, if you could, I'd love to see that in car. That's one I personally struggle with, and I'm sure other people do as well. So
sure.
Maybe
I'll do it.
Yeah, quarter speed's great.
Quarter speed. Yep. I'll take a drink here as we wait. And on this one, in the GT4, it's downshifting's not going to matter because it's going to vary in every car. So never mind.
Well, downshifting is a good thing to bring up because engine braking does play a part in your overall braking distance on some cars, and some cars it doesn't.
Yep.
Plus, I find that it helps with my consistency too. I got to make sure I commit to the same downshifts. I don't do 2 downshifts one lap, 3 downshifts the next lap, and so on and so forth. So if I'm committing to 2, I stay with 2.
And actually, in one of the corners, in 2 of the corners, Ed and I were doing a comparison of lap times. It turns out that downshifting in Cheetah, going a gear farther down, and I think the one before that, lost a half a second each. Sorry, 2/10 each. Totaling of 4/10 just from going 1 gear too low, which I was thinking that I was using for rotation, but clearly it wasn't the right answer.
Yeah, and again, that was in the BMW, I want to say, right?
Yeah.
And so it is car specific for sure. Like I know, like in the McLaren, I was right in between keeping in 4th or going down to 3rd. Someone says they can't hear whoever was talking. And is the audio okay, chat, now?
So
let's see. I'll keep an eye on that.
Ed, there's an Ed mic check.
Yeah, this is Ed.
And then Danny mic check. Oh, he might have gone.
Nope. Listening to the stream, you guys both sound okay. It's very likely that it's me.
It could have been me because I am muting and I'm muting my mic, so that's probably what happened.
Gotcha. All right, cool. So let me do this full speed and then we'll move on. I know this is actually taking a little bit longer than which is I don't have to fill it with anything else at the end. So you guys bear with us. Maybe another 15 minutes. We're coming down to the last few corners. So. All right. So coming down into the I'm not even going to pronounce it. I don't know what the corner. Licop. Anybody know? This is a fun one. This is definitely a good passing opportunity if you're on the tail of the car in front of you, but it's also a very good dive bombing opportunity if you're in public lobbies. So this one, I'll do the helicopter view here. But this is another one where there's not a great reference point, especially if it's dark. And there's nothing really for me that's like on track that's like, hey, break at this line. So I'll run it through and I'll stop where I see the brake input starting here. Let's see. So right here. So basically in no man's land. For me, I look at like basically as soon as I anticipate seeing where this curb starts is where I end up braking. But different car heights and things like that will have a uh different vantage point. So for me, this is another one. I know there's a Marshall stand on the left that some people might use. I know Eric, you're saying you use like the height of the Fanatec sign, and so, but this is another one. There's not a great on-track reference, and in the heat of the battle, you're probably going to have to go off of feel on this one. Again, which could be a combination of sound or something on track. But it's very hard to get this exact every time you come through here, at least for me.
Yeah, I think there's multiple references which we could tell people. So I know you've referenced the curbing on the right with the little marker. I think Danny or you have referenced the guard shack on the left, which kind of disappears at night. So that's something to think about. And then, like you said, I use the horizon and the billboard. So for me, it's like once the billboard bottom shows, then I kind of like say half a second or billboard TRACKILICIOUS break.
Yeah.
And so it is a very feel type corner, but multiple
usually when you
references.
Yeah, and usually like for me the best way to do it, or actually saying this out loud, what I may end up doing in the future is when I feel like I've nailed it during a lap, what I probably would do is go back in the replay, find out where you broke, go back in car, and look on your own to say, oh, okay, this is where I broke, and then just look for something that looks like you could use it as a reference line. That way it's tailored to you, and both a braking line and a reference, right? Like where you're not going too deep or too shallow. It fits your braking style is probably a good way to prepare for these corners where there's not something on directly on track that you can use.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. Personally, I use the steward shack right there on the left. As soon as it passes through my line of sight or through my provisional, I can't even talk tonight.
Peripheral.
But as soon as it passes through, I will start braking. You can also utilize one of these braking points that we just mentioned, along with the sound of the engine. So as soon as it hits a certain amount of a certain pitch on its RPM range, you can use that as your reference point as well, just to verify that you're in the right spot. This one's pretty tough though. Going up and over that crest is a little bit of a blind corner, so you have to be mindful of your inside if people are eager to get around. But you can also pass around the outside. And Ed made a great point. It's a great opportunity to get around someone.
Yeah. My favorite move here would be if you're on someone's butt and they defend inside. This is a really good corner to just go around the outside.
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen actually a lot of passes on. I think looking back at the qualifying race we had, I think Riley Minear had a fantastic pass on me. I think it was the outside here. So this is for me one of the coolest passing opportunities where you kind of come off the corner, you pass somebody, you're like, that was awesome. This is one of those corners. And I guess for those folks, you might be able to use this orange porta potty on the left hand side as a braking reference too, but that might be too far outside. But yeah, so go ahead.
I'm not honestly sure if you can see it from the car.
Now we gotta look. Actually, let's see. Can you see the orange porta potty?
That's gonna be a tough one.
Now I'm gonna be looking for it all the time.
Okay, never mind. You can't see it. All right. Maybe in triples you could see it. So scratch that. Don't use the porta potty. Or I mean, use the porta potty if you need to, but don't use it as a breaking point. So coming into here, there's a few different ways through this corner. I feel like depending on what you're trying to accomplish in a race, right? To either, hey, someone defended, I'm going to try to go around the outside, or someone's on the outside, I'm going to take a different line in. For me personally, this is a hard corner for me to get right. I struggle with this one, and I rarely nail it every time, and I need to make compromises on my line based on how well I feel like, because of how vague the breaking point is. I make compromises to my line every time through here to try to maximize it based on how I entered the corner. We'll see here where like I try to stay on the right-hand side for as long as I can to widen it, and then sort of trail brake in. I feel like this is a corner where trail braking really helps. And then I feel like you can use the corner, as Danny mentioned, for a little extra rotation if you need it, but there are some bumps here that engage the traction control in a lot of cars, and it kind of can kill your exit. So if I nail this corner, I try not to touch the inside curb. Danny, help me out here if you have a sort of a different philosophy or a different approach to the corner.
No, I think you hit it spot on. And you made a great point. This is one of those corners that it's very unlikely you're going to get it perfect every single time, because it is difficult to manage that breaking point and be consistent with it. So you can, like you said, use that curb when you need to. Um, and this is also a corner that I try to take as a little bit of a later apex. That way you get as much benefit from the straight as you can. You get a much better exit out of it. So
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, here I use the curb a little bit, and in race, if you're fighting side by side, by the way, on exit, it's easy to drop a wheel over here, or kind of get back on the throttle too much and hopefully try to save it and swing out too wide and kill some lap time too. So, um, uh, just be aware if you're a little bit wide through here, especially in GT4s, you can drift off. But let me go through here in cockpit what it looks like. And then here I try to get the wheel as straight as I can, as fast as I can. And that's, to Danny's point, that's what a late apex does basically, right? You're kind of delay and turn in so that as you're coming off the corner, your wheel's as straight as possible, so you're not hitting the traction control and you're getting as much drive off as you can.
This is probably the second longest quote-unquote straight in the game, right? I mean, there's a lot of straight distance coming out of this corner, so there's a lot of time to be gained or lost.
Yeah, and if I come off here a little bit slow, where I kind of are slower than I'd like, I try to get as close to this curb as I can without scrubbing off too much speed. So in this instance, I feel like I came off pretty good. I'm not making it to that inside curb unless I actually lift, and obviously I don't want to lift. So, that's just another example of how like you can change the line a little bit based on how you take a corner, and then you can adjust the exit based on that, just to try to maximize what's already been done.
So I do have a question for you guys. I think braking into the turn is a good place to overtake. My question for you guys is strategy on overtaking out of the turn. So do you guys ever, there being one or two cars ahead of you, take a wider, like a super wide turn in, and then a sharp turn to really get a run out of the corner to maybe take them down into the corner coming up?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what's going on, right? If it's like a really slow car, you kind of have to adjust based on what you think's going to happen, right? You may end up doing that, where you do take a super wide entry just to really maximize your corner off, because they're not going to come off the corner all that quick, and you can get around them before this corner here, or what is that corner? Is it mine shaft? I don't know if that's the corner or the straight. But if, like, another example, if you have two cars that are battling, right, you may take a slightly wider line because you know that both their exits are going to be compromised. You don't want to give up a ton of time on entry because you're not going to be able to make that up on the straight. But you know that they're going to be a little bit slower on mid corner and exit, so you may compromise that a little bit and like take a later apex to try to see if you can take advantage of them being slowed up. So yeah, I mean, all the time. Yeah, and again, it just, how you do it just depends on what's happening in front of you.
Awesome.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yep.
Next, this little kink here, whatever they call it. In the GT4s, I use all this curb because it's not flat in the GT4s. You could take it flat, but you're going to compromise your line into the next corner, which is the Crocodiles, which is kind of a cool name for a corner. I don't know why it's plural, though. And so in the GT4s, I try to stay out wide as I can, turn in, and then there's just a slight lift you could see on the throttle trace here, and you can use all this curb on the inside. Don't go over it, but you can use all of it, and you need it in the GT4s. And this way, you're sort of setting up the next set, or the next corner, and you're not trying to fight your way back across the track. So if I didn't lift, my car would be out basically on the right hand side of the track here, and now I'm looking for my braking point, trying to cross the track over to get a good line in the next corner, and it's just too many things going on at once. So a little lift in the middle of that corner can really set you up well here, and maybe you'll lose a half tenth through that kink, but because you're in a better line with a better braking point, you're probably going to make up that time plus a tenth or two, right? As opposed to going in on a really tight line, trying to fight back, miss your braking point. Who knows what's going to happen. So for this particular corner, I use the 100, the line on the 100 as a reference. You can get on on that extra runoff area on the left hand side, that the concrete part. But for me, it's been a little bouncy, and then since it's sort of a slight right-hander entering, you run the risk of getting a tire off, and then you're in the gravel. So I try to stay a little conservative and keep it, a wheel width to the outside, and then I start braking probably, I don't know, what's a McLaren width or length, like 9 feet. So I probably start braking like 20 feet before that 100 marker. See if I can get a good pause here when it does. There. Okay, maybe a little bit longer. So in car, it feels like 20 feet, but again, that can be deceiving. So this is kind of where I start braking. So which is probably closer to like 50 feet back from the line. This corner here is another one of those tricky ones where it feels like you're cresting a hill. So it's a matter of, you want to get back on as early as possible. The earlier you get back on, the more the rear wants to step out. So I tend to take it varies really. Like, again, this is another one of those corners where it depends on how well I get into the braking zone. You can use the curb on the inside, or you can choose not to. I shoot for not using too much of the curb, but will if, like, by the way I'm braking, it kind of sucks me in. So here, let's see. Here I used a lot of it, and your goal here is to obviously get off here. It's not a long straightaway, but you don't want to compromise your exit too much. And then coming off this corner, there's a potential track cut. You can use more of the track than I used here. I was a little conservative, but there is a track cut here. While you're not really going to lose time, there's no like big bumps or anything. There is a track cut warning if you go a little bit too wide here. So here, let me run this through. Actually, let me do the kink here as well. Bear with us here. I know we're running a little bit long. Thanks for hanging with us. We got really 2 corners left after this. So there you go. You hear the car kind of slide a little bit because of some of the bumps on the curb. I probably got a little too much. So I definitely had a little bit more time in the lap by not messing that up. But again, tricky corner. Rear wants to step out most of the time, and it's that little balance of little brake, little throttle inputs to shift can really help.
And patience on the throttle, right? Because I think this is one of those things where if you get on the throttle a little bit too early, or if you've turned in a little bit too early, you're definitely going to get pushed out. And it's another place where you can get track limits quite easily.
Yeah, yep, for sure. Especially during the heat of the race. So this next corner is Cheetah. And this one is a little scary during the race. Unlike my previous advice where if there's black on the curb, you can use it. Don't try to use this curb. In the GT4s, it's a little forgiving where if you clip it, you're not going to die. But in the GT3s, if you clip it, you're probably going to die. So coming into here, I try to use as much of the curb as you can. As you can see, that's basically all the curb and a little bit of the dirt to try to widen this entry. And this is a corner where I struggle to know if I want to go up into 4th or stay into 3rd. I think in this lap, I'm not even going to, I stayed in 3rd. Because on the McLaren, you're like right on the rev limiter, and again, this varies per car, but this is a confidence corner. You're basically in a four-wheel drift to try to get the car to turn quick enough, and then back on the throttle super quick. So it's a dab of the brakes. In some cars, it's a partial lift. In others, it's a full lift. But your goal here is to get as close to this curb as you can without hitting it, kind of while you're four-wheel sliding. So in here, I actually had a little bit of extra gap here, so I could have actually gone over maybe a foot or so. But it's one of those things where, or maybe 2 feet, where you kind of want to play it a little bit safe in the race, because again, you can hit it a little bit in the GT4s, but in the GT3s, you'll be sky high coming off. Let me go full through. You can use all the runoff coming off this corner. If you get a little too wide, though, it's going to be super bumpy if you get on the grass. It doesn't lose a lot of lap time, but it does kill your tire pressures on the left-hand side. So try to avoid getting in the grass there because of the bumps. But really, use as much as you can here. Coming off this corner, use as much as curbing as you can to maximize your speed through it.
And I think that's something I learned from you is it almost seems like you're targeting hitting the apex with your front right, but then allowing the car to slip just outside of it. That's what it looked like when I was watching you do it in the M4 the other day, in the M4 GT4 the other day.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, well, let's see what it looks like here. But it's another one where that was 3/4 speed. I mean, it's a tricky corner, and this is another one where you can use a little bit of throttle and brake inputs just to adjust where you're going to end up. Hopefully missing that curb. But and then coming off, final corner here. This is Ingwe. I should probably just next time just use corner numbers instead. So I think this is corner 16, turn 16. For me, I use the 50 sign as a reference, and I actually, looking at this, I probably should use the Stewart Jack as a reference, because that one is probably a little bit closer to my breaking point. So I struggle with this one a little bit, where I think it's easy to get sucked into this corner, where you're going in just a little bit too deep and then compromising the straightaway. And so for me, I tend to try to be a little bit conservative during the race, because it's one of those where, of course, I hit the wrong button. It's easy to mess up and then just kind of start the next lap on the wrong foot. So start braking. Again, I apologize here. There we go. Maybe 20, 30 feet before the Stewart sign. This is a hard braking zone initially, and then it's a good opportunity to practice trail braking coming in. And the GT4s, you can use a little bit of the curb. There is some bounces that can upset the car, but if you need a little extra rotation, it can help. Otherwise, I try to just barely avoid it, get as close as I can to it without hitting it. And then obviously you have a long straightaway coming up, so your goal is to get back on the throttle as soon as possible. And you can use more of this runoff than what I did. I try to shoot. I feel like when I'm in the car, I try to keep the middle of the car to the left of the end of this curb, and that feels like I'm not going to hit a track limit there. But this is a prime spot for hitting track limits. And just know this isn't grass here or dirt. This is actually concrete over here. So if you do need it in the race, you can use this. For the longest time, I thought this was dirt, and it's not. But as you can tell, there's a lot of marbles there, so it kind of feels like dirt. You have a lot of stuff kicked up, but in a pinch, you can use it to get around somebody, or not advocating going off track limits, but if someone pushes you, you can use that runoff area. And again, I'll go through this full speed, and then I'll go in yeah, it does give you track limits. So don't do it on a hot lap, but like in a scenario where you need to avoid somebody, you can get over there. You'll potentially get a track cut, but it's not like it's dirt and you're going to spin.
I think the idea is use it to not die.
Yeah, you can use it as an escape road, not as your primary line.
I don't believe that. You got 3 track warnings to use, and
That's
if you
why.
don't
That's
use
how
them all, you're
Danny
not
got
racing
them.
hard enough.
That's how he got the 149.9. Now I know.
Yeah,
He
no.
used that area. Um,
I do want to make an important note about your entire track guide, and something that I certainly caught on to, but maybe others have not. It's pretty obvious to use braking boards or other items as breaking points, and they're easy to reference, and they're great until they're not there anymore. So what you'll notice is when Ed was describing a lot of his breaking points, and a lot of what I had to teach myself as well, which took some time. You need to find those references that are never going to change if someone hits them. A lot of times you'll be in a race and someone will take out a braking board that you were using and relying on, and now you're lost. You have no idea where to brake. So it's important to use something that's static and never going to change, regardless of if someone hits a wall or runs into something. So that way you don't lose that reference.
You know,
yeah, that's a very good point.
it's interesting you say that, Danny, because I subconsciously, and I know I thought this, and I don't know why I didn't say it out loud for everyone, but as soon as he mentioned the guard shack, I kind of like laughed at myself and go, oh, that's because that 50 gets taken out all the time. So it's such a good thing to keep in mind, is that, you know, to have alternative references. But the 50 is probably the best thing to reference, in that you don't have to look elsewhere. It's very direct. It's very there until it's not there anymore.
Yep.
Exactly.
And then with that, like, kind of going back to what we said in the beginning, having a primary, ideally your breaking point, your reference is on the track or just outside of the track, so that you're not deferring your attention too much, right? That's sort of number one, and immovable, right? So curbs, lines on the track that don't change, bridge, I guess, would be another one here that ain't moving. The steward shack, right? Using those fixed references. Second off would be signs where maybe there's not like if it's there, right? Again, as a secondary thing, if you're racing side by side, like I guess going into turn one here at Kyalami, there's an inside 100 marker. Um, that's probably not going to be taken out, hopefully. And so if you're taking different line, that's where you're taking more of an inside line because someone's on the outside and you're battling. Not just knowing brake markers for your standard line, but knowing brake markers for alternate lines through the corner is another big thing. Because the first time, if you try to go into turn one breaking out what you think is the 100 when you're in the inside line, guarantee you're going to clobber the dude on the outside.
And I did want to add one more thing. So for me, as a more inexperienced ACC driver, and maybe some of the others, I would raise caution to using your rev speed to determine your breaking point, because I don't feel like I'm consistent enough to be really getting into the correct rev range every time. So they're just something to keep in mind. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. I know that's something that I would probably struggle with, because I feel like my exit out of corners is not as consistent as I want it to be. So my speed into the corner is not as consistent as I want it to be, and hence the rev range would change, and changing my next braking position.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there's a good thing in chat too. With is that Mike Jackson, Racer X?
That is Mr. Racer X.
How
Yeah.
you doing, buddy? The rubber can be, usually most time when you're doing races, it's an optimal track, and so the rubber in pattern can be actually a decent. I don't do it in real life, right? But in the sim, you're mostly running an optimal track. The rubber that's on the track that may be going over, like the white line here, may be rubbered in, right? That is another good breaking point. As you're that, again, not using in real life, but in the sim that you can use. If you're in between sort of a hard fixed point, that rubbered in area can work. Just make sure you're in optimum, because it's not going to be there if you're in fast, or at least not as well defined, and it's not going to be there if it's green or wet. So Good point there. All right, so I'll just run through this lap here, finish it off, and then we'll do probably a full lap, Eric, just with nobody talking, just to have that down, and then I guess I know we're over time, so thanks everybody for hanging with us. Hopefully this is helpful. But oh, by the way, it's hold on. I was like, man, I took that corner really slow. I'm doing it 3/4 speed.
Gotta ask, Ed, what was your lap time?
150.0. What was it? 150.070. I had an 8. I had a 149.8 optimal. I just like in it. I couldn't put it all together. And I was trying to get to a 9 to at least match you. By the way, just to I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. All right, so we'll if everyone's okay with it, we'll just do one lap without interruption in cockpit. I don't know if we want to do one external, just to have it documented, and then in the vault of the internet forever. And then if there's any other questions in chat, ask them now, and we'll get to them after that. Does that sound good, Eric?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. All right, cool. We'll do one more external, same lap. Let's see, probably chase cam, or would a helicopter work better? What do you think?
I think chase is probably the best. So
okay.
Maybe the closer view, because you're on the ultra wide.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, perfect.
It's cool. You can see the dash inside. That's pretty cool.
I'd never noticed that before.
All right, cool. And there you have it. Yeah, I know we went over, Eric, so I'll save the other stuff for another time. But I appreciate everybody jumping on. Danny, thanks for color commentating. Pleasure to have you. Thanks for your insights.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Thanks for putting up with me.
I don't know. Now I have to put up with you again Thursday. I don't know if I can do that multiple times a week.
Gosh, another season. No.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And Eric, thanks for getting this all set up.
The thanks is all mine. Appreciate both you guys, and yeah, there's a ton of awesome content that Ed had prepared that's translatable to other tracks as well. So really hope to see you guys back. So Ed, we actually had some great engagement, great viewership today. So definitely appreciate your time next week for the next track that we're gonna be on. Thanks to you guys. Thanks Ed. Thanks Danny. Danny, if we could promote at the Area 52 Discord, if you could pop the invite onto the chat there, and Ed, I don't know if there's anything that you want to promote, but please feel free to do so. Thanks to both you guys for taking the time, and for those that are on, thank you for your time. Hopefully you learned something new. I know I did, even though that I've had multiple discussions on this track, and with both these guys, still a little details that always come in every time you look at it, which is how you incrementally start getting better. So appreciate both you guys. For those that are on that aren't already a part of the Trackalicious Discord server, discord.gg/Trackalicious, join us. We have multiple leagues going on right now, just about to get started. Namely, what you're looking at here and what we're trying to prepare for the GT4 series on Thursdays. Then it's the Saturday endurance. So we actually have a solo endurance that we're starting this week, starting at Imola. It's going to be crazy. It's 2 hours, 40 minutes. Hope to see you guys there. Solo drivers. And then going on to the Sunday GT3s, which we have a crazy field. A couple of spots left, not too many. So join if you're looking at some crazy competition. And then finally, our Tuesday night iRacing league that we're doing with 949. And the endurance is with 949 as well. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention. The guys at 949.
How can you not keep all this straight in your head, Eric?
Yeah,
it's so simple.
Sorry, I try my best, but definitely credit to 949, an amazing bunch of guys. So we're doing both iRacing and the endurance with them, but it's not like we're really too much separated in the other leagues. We have a bunch of guys in their league, and they have a bunch of guys in our other leagues as well. So great bunch of guys. Look forward to seeing everyone there. So I don't think there are any more questions. Again, thank you both for your time, and that's it from us tonight. Good night.
Great.
Have a good evening.
Right,
good day.
real quick before you kill the stream, just if you guys have any feedback for us too, if there's stuff that you want to see in the video, I think next time we can probably shorten the track walk a little bit since we've done one. But if we went into too much detail and it was boring on one thing, or you'd like to see some other things covered, please let us know. Drop it in any of those discords to give us feedback, and we'll try to make it better for next time. Sorry, Eric.
No, absolutely. It's great. And if there's anything else, please feel free to interject, either you, Ed, or Danny. But if not, then we will call it a night. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Thanks.